Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SaaS Connect one-on-one. I'm here with Bob Moore, CEO of Crossbeam, to talk about their amazing annual State of the Partner Ecosystem report. Just to remind you that we're the SaaS partnership community. That's the Cloud Software Association. You can join us at cloudsoftwareassociation.com. We have an amazing Slack community of over 2,000 people, and it's free to join. Later on, after this, for those who are our executive members, we'll be having a one-on-one directly with Bob in our speakers lounge. But in the meanwhile, if you have questions, this report I actually personally think of is how do I grow my career in partnerships? That's really what I think about this report. Fire questions away. Him and I are going to have a very, very vibrant discussion about what some of this stuff even means for all of us. And I may not like all of it, I'm just going to tell you. Because it makes me feel sometimes sad and stressed out about my career. All right, there we go. All right, Bob. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for the warm intro. Now I'm terrified. This is going to be my blood pressure's just ratcheting up as we speak.
I want to go give you hard questions.
Yeah, I know it. So great. Good to see everybody. Yes, Sunir, really appreciate the opportunity to get out in front of the community and talk a bit about this report. I've been a long time member of the CSA now, and love kind of the spirited community debates and discussions that go on, and hopefully this will be no exception. So let me pop over and share some slides. Since we're bantering about design here, we can show things off a little bit. So today, what I want to accomplish is talking just a little bit about the groundwork of just who we are at Crossbeam. I'll cover this quickly, but the idea here is just to kind of validate where we are coming from and what our perspective on the market is. Just as a company. And then I'll talk a bit about what this survey actually is and some of the core data points around just how many people took it, who took it. And then we get into the real fun thing is these 5 key findings. So one thing about this report, if you're on this webinar, it's free to you. We'll make sure you get the link. You can download the whole thing. If you really, really want to geek out about this stuff, it is a nice, lengthy, comprehensive data set with a ton of visualizations and other things. But I've pulled out 5 key findings for today that I think will just be good fodder for Sunir to beat me up a little bit on the data and ask some good probing questions.
I will say there's 4 times as much detail in the actual report, and so you should absolutely read it.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think most of when Sunir is like, oh, did you slice it by X, Y, or Z? My answer is going to be go download the report because we probably did. It's probably in there. But I do have some of the highlights coming out today, and that's what we'll spend the bulk of the time on. And then, yeah, as Sunir said, I'll keep the chat window open here, and Sunir will kind of moderate any questions that come in through chat for us, along with his own, but we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A as well. So, all right, let's dive in here a little bit. If you haven't heard of Crossbeam, we are founded on this one very simple idea, which is that before we came along, it was shockingly hard to answer what seemed like really simple questions, like how many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same companies that your sales reps are trying to sell to? And there were 2 reasons it was hard. One is technology. Comparing data across different data silos or different CRM systems can be really messy. The matching can be bad. The data cleansing that needs to happen can be a nightmare. Data can get out of date really quickly. But then there's also this trust element, this question of you can't draw a Venn diagram between my data and yours unless one of us has all of the data from both data sets so we can figure out what's in the middle. And that's kind of a non-starter for a lot of people, whether they're in partnerships or not. So what Crossbeam does is really serves as almost like an escrow service for data. We sit in between you and your partners as this trusted independent third-party platform, and we allow you to find overlapping customers and prospects with your partners, all while keeping the rest of your data private and secure. And that's kind of the big idea. And it allows you to do things like account mapping. So, inside of our UI here, you can see, if you want to compare your opportunities to one of your partner subscribers, boom, you can get the results and start a thread and have a conversation with the right partner manager or account executive or other party on that side. There's so much you can do at the intersection of these data sets, all the way up and down the funnel, from sourcing new ecosystem qualified leads, down to the co-selling and cross-selling actions that come out of account mapping, all the way down to making sure that every single person who could be using your tech integration is using it, and doing post hoc analysis on things like partner source revenue, and kind of doing all that attribution work that I think causes partnership folks to not get the credit they deserve a lot of the time. So, and maybe the most exciting thing in my world, because I'm a huge data nerd, is it's not that this is all happening inside yet another silo, that silo being Crossbeam. We actually have very powerful APIs and a ecosystem of our own partners that's growing exponentially, whether it's Slack or Salesforce or HubSpot or Snowflake or any number of the applications that are powered directly through our APIs. You can get the data in from almost anywhere, and more importantly, you can get the results out and put them almost anywhere. And that is the real kind of key, is this data portability and fluidity, where Crossbeam, in addition to being a great UI where you can go and get these answers, it also becomes this data layer that's powering your other systems of records and kind of meeting your team members where they are. So if you want to be a force multiplier for sales or marketing or your product group, you can get this data in the hands of those people where they're already working without forcing them to log in to get another tool. And that's really where you start to get into scale and you start to get into influence, which is great. So cool. I am happy to geek out ad nauseum about Crossbeam. The other thing I'll say that's not in these slides is Crossbeam is free. So the only people that pay for Crossbeam are folks that get into usage patterns that are so far along that they actually want to start routing the results data out back into their systems of record. But if you are just using Crossbeam to connect with partners, do account mapping, compare data sets to each other, there's no limits on how much data you can have, how many partners you can have. You can sign up for free, connect your data sources, connect with unlimited partners, get those answers out. And you only pay when you want to push that data back into Salesforce, or you want SSO or some other enterprise capability. But our mandate really is to grow our network and create as much value as possible out in the ecosystem. And that's, going to continue to be that way. And, we'll make our money on the big enterprise sales. So for most folks in the CSA community, it's a free product.
You're also on the board of the CSA, so it's even better than free because you help make all this happen. So
there you go. Right. Full disclosure, we are huge supporters of the CSA for a lot of obvious reasons. So it all comes full circle back into helping power the community, hopefully, which is great.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Okay, one thing before we get into this, we should do a little bit of framing, because partnerships is such a huge space. There's different kinds of partnerships, brand partnerships, tech partnerships, sales and distribution. One thing about the data that you're coming back from, actually, I think you could go into the survey itself. So why don't we talk about who you actually interviewed and just get where the data came from?
Yeah. Great point. So there are a lot of people out there that would consider themselves under the umbrella of partnerships. And I think we at Crossbeam, because of who our audience is and because of who our user base is, when we talk about partnerships, I think we talk about a version of partnerships that's very heavily aligned with how most of the folks in CSA would talk about partnerships. And that's meaning that B2B is really where a very, very heavy focus is. And also companies that would be considered ISV partners in kind of the old style acronym lingo of the partnership space, ultimately product companies. So folks that build products that likely think of partnerships as including integrations with other products. Those B2B ISV companies make up the vast majority of the respondents in this survey, overwhelmingly B2B, and it's about 80% are ISVs. So the non-ISV respondents are very often people that work with ISVs that are, again, in B2B. So folks that are system integrators, agency partners, other folks in kind of the traditional channel with a capital C. And then this tends to be respondents from companies that are on the larger side, at least on the startup spectrum, meaning 100 employees or more. So certainly there's a whole lot of room in the 100 plus category, but this is not a bunch of respondents from one person partnership teams or kind of SMB style companies. There's a lot of very large mature companies in the respondent group here. And we ran the survey at the tail end of last year. So it was open from November 10th to December 18th, and we got 173 respondents. So even when you start to slice and dice into some of these subcategories, a good enough healthy sample to feel like there's some statistical significance here to feel okay about.
Yeah, so just a couple like desegmenting stuff. Like some people will obviously be missing. So like small SMB SaaS and VSB, very small business SaaS, probably not going to have a channel sales team, probably not fitting here. And people on the platform side of partnerships who are more interested in product extension. This is more revenue-based partnership people we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction. I would say that there is a definite skew in this report, not just in who we talk to, but also in the way that we frame these questions. To kind of, we dig deeper when the person responding has revenue as part of their KPIs. So, for example, we ask about KPIs and we say, how much of a focus is partner influence revenue? If they say not at all, there's a whole bunch of questions they don't even get asked. But if they do say yes, then we get into all the nitty gritty of that. So, we go more and more deep as we get into this kind of fewer steps away from revenue. But what I will say is, just because someone has a revenue KPI, we've found is not always tightly tethered to them being a traditional true channel salesperson. One thing that we're seeing increasingly, and I'll show this in the data, is just the number of ISV companies and folks that are tasked with integrations as the primary way in which partnerships get established are starting to have more and more revenue influence as part of their mandate. And that's the emergence of tools like Crossbeam that can enable account mapping and kind of cross-pollination of customer sets. It just unlocks a lot of these motions that allow technology partnerships to actually become a new form of channel partnerships. Like tech is the new channel, basically, is kind of what we're observing, where the opportunity to touch and influence revenue, even if integrations are the tip of the spear for you, is becoming greater and greater. And that's, I'll have a slide on that a bit later on. Some of the.
I say people are interested in that story because it's an awesome story. We had a really, really good SaaS Connect one-on-one in the middle of 2020 with Freshworks, Rajiv from Freshworks and Jake from SignEasy, talking about exactly that was what happened at Freshworks. They had taken their tech partnership program and realized that this was a revenue opportunity to go into channel through things, particularly account mapping. So those of it's on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Cloud Software Association. You can find it. Freshworks SignEasy. It's great. Okay.
Well, sounds amazing. Yeah. Gotta get a case study out of those guys. It's a great reminder. All righty. So 5 key findings. Let's dig in. This is the fun stuff. So we are going to start with average salary. Then we're going to talk about KPIs. Then you can't have a 2020 survey without talking about the impact of COVID-19. We'll talk a little about reporting structures, and then go-to-market strategy, which is that thing we were just talking about in terms of how partner teams are going to market. So let's talk salary. Here's the pop quiz of the day. Toss it in the chat. I would love to see folks' thoughts on what you think across the entire respondent base of people in our survey, the average total on-target earnings salary of a partnership professional is. So this spans all levels. It's kind of a blended average, spans all levels of seniority. It's OTE, so it includes any variable comp. Very curious to see. We got some responses rolling in here.
This includes stock options, by the way. It's a good question.
This no, this does not include that. This
cash
is
on the barrelhead.
Cash OTE. Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing some people that either read the report or really know their industry. This is good.
People are going to pay in GameStop stock this year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's Dogecoin or it's nothing. All right, the correct answer, 162,346. So we had a lot of people write dollar right there. Eric with the $1, Bob. But quite a few. Travis hit it really closely there. This number is where it shook out. And it's interesting if you break that down by seniority. You can really see the story of a career trajectory here over the course of folks in partnerships that, may get started at kind of an associate analyst entry level. Partner manager is really the title, the go-to title for people that are working in partnerships. I think at least in our data, it is hands down the most common title we see. And then as folks move up the org chart at the director and VP level, you start on an average basis to creep up close to that 250K mark, kind of peaking out at the VP. So this is kind of the picture that we saw over the course of this year.
We'll say that number. Yeah, this is great. Let's break it down, because like this is the number that I think drives people the most crazy about your report.
Yeah, totally.
Including me.
Yeah, so doing this by geo, the three geos where we had enough respondents to feel good about putting a number on a geo here was the US, the UK, and Canada. And you can see this massive disparity in the US average number coming in at 178, and the UK and Canada looking a lot like each other, closer to 120 here. I think a big part of the
Queen, Bob.
Yeah, really. This, among other things, made me very excited about opening up a Canadian office sometime soon. But I think a big influencer here is, number one, the Bay Area effect in general, and the concentration of folks in the United States that exist in kind of the partnerships world that we are talking about, right? The heavily skewed towards SaaS, heavily skewed toward the B2B world, tends to be, at least prior to COVID-19, a really heavy concentration in the Bay Area, and the premium on Bay Area salaries kicks up. There's also lingering variables here where leadership positions are also disproportionately likely to be in the Bay Area. So even if you have a global partnerships team, it's much more likely that your highest paid partnership employees are going to be in the US, and then your partner managers and other folks that are earlier in their careers may be more likely to be in those other geos, which is going to just pull the averages here down outside of the US and create kind of a center of gravity for the dollars in kind of the major markets that exist in the US technology universe.
So some questions. Sabrina Silk asks, this is all US dollars you're posting, right?
This is all US dollar. It's all converted to US dollars. Yeah. So it's people may have reported in their localized currency, but it's all mapped back to US. Yeah.
Yeah. This is what drives me nuts, because I live in Canada and I look at these numbers every year. I'm glad you broke it down by geography this year. It made me feel a little bit better. Do you think, within the United States, did you break it down by city?
There is, do I have this here? No, I don't. So download the report, and it's not, it's geographically distributed enough that we don't have like great, rich centers of data. However, we do have enough for San Francisco. If I recall correctly, everything that I just said about San Francisco is kind of revalidated by the breakdown in the US. And we basically do like SF versus non-SF. Those are the two buckets where we have enough data points. But yeah, there's a big concentration in SF, and SF is considerably higher. Although I think we also compared this to external benchmarks that we saw for things like sales leadership and marketing leadership, and it's proportional. So it's not like there's a super SF premium that is specific to the partnerships world. I think what you're seeing here is more an artifact of general trends in compensation and cost of living, at least leading into the pandemic in the SF area. I cannot wait to get this data next year because I think what you're going to see is a dispersion of talent. And I think you're also going to see, what may take a few years to correct, but I think a little bit of the pool of kind of the cost of living justification for the Bay Area, at least trickling down a little bit. Certainly not coming to parity, but seeing rents in SF over the course of the last few quarters and the directionality of that, I wouldn't be surprised if it cycles its way through to salaries as well.
And then, not to rattle too much further, but I saw in the distribution data that there's a lot of numbers in your report and beyond 300K that might be pulling things up. Is that the case? Like, are there, like, this is a median, but it could be still a lot of numbers on the far end pulling them further along.
Very, very true. Yeah. And I think that also, there may be, and I don't know whether this is a artifact of selection bias or actually representative of the true distribution, but bigger companies can justify more senior roles that exist in those businesses and more people in those senior roles. And at least in our survey data, the likelihood that if you're a bigger company, you're headquartered in the US or your leadership is in the US is higher. So it's kind of this like self-fulfilling prophecy of, you get a few folks from large blue chip publicly traded B2B SaaS businesses who respond to our survey. And yes, more likely than not, they're going to have a lot of partnership people that make a lot of money that sit higher in the org chart that probably are those 300K plus OTE folks. And they're all going to be in San Francisco. And that's just, again, the geographic pool.
And then the final thing is when you mentioned variable comp, OTE, this is like revenue-based partnership comparing to VP sales rather than VP marketing per se. How does it basically in your data set, is it more trending because it's to sales comp? Is it comparable? Do you have any idea? How does this
Yeah,
compare?
so from a leadership standpoint, and this is as much based on just my experience as a SaaS CEO as it is like directly collecting this data, you compare these numbers in terms of seniority to what you would expect to see on an OTE basis for like a VP of sales or a chief revenue officer, and it's certainly lower. I think at a even kind of Series B or C funded, call it 100-person plus SaaS business, it's not uncommon to see VP sales or chief revenue officer compensation that's pushing its way even closer to that 500K mark, kind of double what you're seeing here on an OTE basis. So I think there is from just a career path standpoint, in the partnerships world, it may be a slightly shorter journey with a little less competition in the way to kind of get to this VP level. But I think the upside that exists for people that are in pure play revenue leadership positions is certainly higher. And I think these probably sit a few notches down. Now, when you get down into like the manager or director level, these are probably a little more comparable to like a commercial account executive or a sales director comp. So the deviation's less, but the height of the highest ceilings feel like they are higher if you're in a pure play kind of revenue role.
And I think there's a groundswell amongst the CSA membership that when we're talking about salaries, that Sean Blanda and your design team and the content team who did this report, we love them for doing this. So
and I think I tell you what, as it's illuminating. I mean, you all know, or you may not know, we ourselves have been trying to build out our own partner ecosystem, right? So I mentioned earlier that we've got all kinds of integrations into third-party products. So we've been building out our own partnership teams, and it's kind of entertaining and humbling if we're trying to make a hire and benchmarking salary and we try to Google some data and our own report shows up, and that's kind of the thing we're going after. But yeah, hopefully this is helping create a little transparency in the space and giving a little negotiating leverage for folks out there in the community.
This is a good PSA that Sean just had a baby, so hats off to him. Congratulations.
Yeah, if you know Sean Blanda and you want to send him a onesie, now's a great moment. He had a baby a few days ago.
All right, stop interrupting. Thank you for rattling. This is a good place to dig in, though.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think this is, this stuff I know is some of the meatiest. And I do see a really good question here. I'll just comment on from Badr Hamdan out there in the chat asking, why is VP higher than C-suite? That seems weird, right? Here's what's going on there. And this is a thing that we see over and over again, which is there is a tendency in early stage companies to artificially assign C-level titles to people prematurely. And that often also very much coincides with co-founders that kind of need a fancy title by nature. So like a non-CEO co-founder may very well have like a chief partnerships officer title, but it may be skewed toward these smaller companies that haven't actually gotten to a point of maturity where they have great ability to measure ROI and justify very high OTE for these leaders. So because these are averages, I think that there is some skewing of the data where people that have a C-suite level title that are responsible for partnerships are also disproportionately likely to be at earlier stage companies, and therefore the comp bands are just lower. And that's what's pulling that down.
Peter, actually, I have one more question too. Do you know what the split is base bonus? 70-30, 80-20, 60-40, whatever.
Oh, base bonus. I don't. It may be in the report. Anecdotally, anecdotally, just on my own observations on how these things tend to get structured, is that it's not 50-50, which is what you'd probably be seeing in like a traditional account exec role. Because again, we're working with averages here. You've got a lot of people where there's very little, if any, commission-based portion of their salary, because it's when your role skews more toward the technology integrations or things that are less directly tied and attributable to revenue, it just tends to be a little more likely to be salary based. So we're going to see that stuff move around, and hopefully we'll get some more granularity on it in future surveys. Cool. All right, let's keep on moving here. Most common KPIs. So we asked folks basically what they get measured on, and wanted to kind of go through a few of the findings here. So we found that 63% of the respondents here said that one of their KPIs is partner sourced revenue. So that's direct attribution. It's not hand wavy, hey, all these new customers happened to also use our partners' products. This was, you've got something where it's part of an attribution model, whether it's a lead registration that happened or there's some kind of co-selling motion that's being tracked in your CRM system. These are the numbers that matter. And that it's a pretty big number, and I think is reflective of kind of this increasing trend toward the actual sales dollars being a big deal for the majority of people in these partnership roles. What's interesting, I really like this way of looking at the data. So we asked people what their top KPI was. Or actually we tracked basically like what proportion of people said that they were held to certain KPIs. And then we broke that out by how big the company size is. And what you see on this chart is basically for all these different company sizes by employees, what is the most common KPI that companies get held to. And what you see here is it's pretty amazing. As you go through the life cycle of a company, you almost get to see a little bit of this partner maturity framework start to take hold, where at these very small sizes, 0 to 9 team members, it's really about the very, very top of the funnel from a partnership standpoint. How many partners do you have, right? How many partnerships have been created? Hard to measure the ROI on that, but that's where they are in the life cycle. And then as you get a bit bigger, again, you're at the very top of the funnel here. So you're talking about leads generated by partners. Like simply, how can we get more conversations, tossed into the top of that funnel? Starts to be connected to revenue, but it's very, very distant from the closing event. And then you get a little bit further along here, in the 50 to 99 range, and you see partner influenced revenue. Again, the distinction between influenced and sourced is that influence might be, a single touch in a multi-touch attribution model. It might be that they, there was a mention that happened by one of the partners. They're using one of the tech integrations as part of their pilot. And then, obviously the partnership had some influence on the value that they got out. But by the time you get to the 100 mark and up, partner source revenue becomes really overwhelmingly the most common the appearing KPI for folks that are in these roles, and it holds steady there from there on out. So, you can almost map this on a graph here, looking at this from a maturity curve standpoint.
I love this slide. This was the most interesting thing I saw, because I've never seen a framework that showed a partnership maturity model quite like this yet.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you gave Sean that exact feedback or not, but one of the things that we're really excited about, which is kind of our next real marquee piece that'll be coming out, is actually digging into that exact phrase, which is like building out a partner maturity framework that kind of pulls information and data from all these survey results, but also just tons of real world examples to show, what it means to be at a certain point of maturity in terms of your partner organization, quantitatively, qualitatively, team structure wise, ecosystem wise. And I think I agree. This is one of my favorite pieces of information from the survey, because it paints that picture, and it's remarkable just how consistent it is. Like you'd expect it to be a little bit noisier, but it's like, it really is this beautiful progression that tells a true story here.
I actually lived through this myself, and now seeing that other people live through it too, like the same team size, like organization size, is kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, pretty interesting. It's intuitive. It really is. I think if either of us had to like sketch on a napkin, what this would look like, this is probably what we'd come up with. But you always expect the data to uncover a different story, but here it is in hard numbers.
Anonymous asks, have you broken that down by partner team size yet? Or is that what's coming up in the next research? project?
Oh yeah. So we have the data. I don't think it's broken up by partner team size in the SOAP report, the state of the partner ecosystem report. However, we've got the data that we need to do that breakdown, and I bet we're going to do that in the partner maturity framework content, which will also be free to everyone in CSA. So we'll get that in your hands as soon as we have it.
Nice.
All right. COVID-19. So very very, very important topic as it relates to all pieces of the fabric of our lives over the course of the last year. But professionally, obviously a big driver for a lot of folks. I think one thing that was very nice to see is just the proportion of folks who felt satisfied with the way their company has adapted in the wake of COVID-19. I think you rewind the clock and there were a lot of question marks around the March, April timeframe around what the impact would be in the business world at large, and then specifically within partnerships where, whether it's fair or not, the trope is that a lot of the work that partnerships people do is, going to trade shows, sitting down at a bar, high-fiving in real life with their partnership counterparts and making things happen. And a real wrench got thrown into that with the lockdowns in response to COVID. But what you see here is, with data we've collected starting in November, there's been enough time that has gone by for companies to kind of have either screwed it up or not. And it seems like overwhelmingly companies have adapted well. And also, probably even more encouraging is that the proportion of companies that added to their partnerships team post the start of the pandemic is by my math here, more than twice as much as those who have fewer team members during that same time period. So even though there was uncertainty up front, and you see quite a few that have kind of hovered around the same level, growth was really the prevailing story here, to a margin of 2-to-1 in terms of the continued expansion of folks in these partnership organizations.
I have a question that maybe you can answer because you have your account with the platform data of usage. My observation inside the CSA is from February or March, whenever it happened, to like May or June, there was a steep drop off in activity and partnerships where everyone's freaking out. And then between July, August, things had flipped around completely and we're growing like crazy. Now, maybe not in this data because it's like a snapshot in time, but from Crossbeam usage data, did you see that kind of like activity?
Yeah, so I would say across the board throughout the pandemic, and we raised our Series B round right in the heart of it, right in July of this past summer, and I think a big driver of that was, I think a lot of the decrease in the activity or the perception of activity that you're describing was actually a shift of people taking the energy and bandwidth that had previously been allocated to event season or previously allocated to, things that might have been a little bit more publicly viewable or, built around big events or lightning strikes in their worlds, and actually putting that energy into sitting in front of a computer all day. And when you're in partnerships and you sit in front of a computer with a higher percentage of your time, it actually increases the likelihood that you're on something like Crossbeam, actually building these kind of workflows and automations and a much more kind of data-driven approach to doing this work. So we saw consistently, without exception, month over month, every single month in 2020 was a record month for us. And your classic kind of, and there's some network effects in our business, as you can imagine, as people invite their partners on. But we just saw this continued exponential growth in the usage of the platform. And I think you can make an argument, and we did when we raised our Series B, that we're actually one of those companies that is able to kind of become accelerated a bit by the existence of the lockdown, because there's bandwidth that has gone away from other things where we actually end up being a really good place to kind of asynchronously and within the realm of your own private workspace still get work done. So kind of a future of work angle there. So it's hard to know though, to answer your question directly, like, was there a slowdown or was there not? We just have to extract away like the underlying growth rate of the business. And who's to say that without a pandemic, we wouldn't be twice as big as we are today, right? Like it's entirely possible that there was some throttling on there in different periods. But the prevailing thing is that people have not stopped using these online collaboration tools, and if anything, I think it's been accelerated.
For my own business, AppMine, we saw July just hit the floor, and then after that, bounced like crazy. It was wild. And December was even bigger, like 400% growth. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I think the other thing is there's certainly some seasonality that, like in 2019, August as a great example was just like, from a sales activity standpoint for us, was just completely dead. Like, the universe of people that were buying our products were just not on the map for the entire month of August. And actually August of this year was not nearly as bad. And again, I attribute it back to COVID, which is like people are not, flying to their destination vacation with their family and unplugging. They're taking that time in different ways, or hopefully not, but I think in some cases not taking it. And it's just flatlined the seasonality effects a little bit this year.
Well, I'll say a couple of things on this. The CSA, if you're looking for work, because there was, I think, very high attrition this year in 2020, people moving around. We have a pretty extensive job board and job market, and we have a new recruiter, Dave Weinberg. He's in Hash Jobs in our Slack community. You should hang out and talk to him if you're looking to hire. And I do appreciate that only 2% or whatever were complaining about their COVID responses in your survey data. The CSA consistently found 18% of people complaining about in their membership about COVID, even in, as a concept. It still continues to be an interesting experience for everybody, for sure.
Yeah, undeniable. And I think we are, while you might see some lights at the end of the tunnel, we're not out of the woods yet. And I think it'll end up being, this, if last year was a story of a year in transition, definitionally this year will be too. And I think there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. And when you survey people, it might have a huge impact on their point of view.
Yeah.
Cool. So I know I'm looking at the clock here. I want to make sure we're good on time. So I'll breeze through a few of these final points. And again, if you want to really deep dive, you can do so in the actual document. So 52% of people were promoted or received a raise in the last year. What was interesting, though, within this data is that the people that did not get promoted or receive a raise on average get paid a lot more. I think a little bit of the story here is, for companies that were continuing to invest in their own teams in times of uncertainty, I think possibly for folks that were on the higher end of the comp band or potentially more just senior in the organization, those folks kind of, held steady in the midst of uncertainty while trying to retain and grow and cultivate junior people in growth environments was a practice that continued. So the height of the highest ceilings may not have moved up, but the ability for people that were sitting below those ceilings to advance, I think, continued to exist. Real quick on reporting structures here, about half of the respondents in our survey report to sales, about a quarter directly to the CEO, about an eighth to marketing, and then really small samples into product or engineering. And we did a good chunk into other here. And I think this too relates back to the idea of a lot of folks that report to no one. So co-founders and other folks that may run or own partnerships, but don't really have a reporting structure to call home.
Before you go past that slide, part of that data is one thing. It shows that the platform partnership people did not respond to the survey. This is very much the revenue side. And the big debate about where partnership lives, sales or marketing or product, if you want part of the comp, let's be honest, the salaries are pretty high in this survey for people on the revenue side. It makes sense. You're making money. It does speak to a career in partnerships, moving closer and closer to partner source revenue and being a revenue generator. And maybe that means being friends with your VP sales more than most of us have been in the past. So it's another interesting feedback. Personally, that makes me turn in my stomach because I don't like being in the VP sales group. I like being in the marketing group, but we can have that debate another time. Yes.
Yeah, I think your analysis is spot on there. This says a little something about who's in the population of respondents, but I think it also says a little something about, again, like that evolution where the revenue dollars are the center of gravity. And as partnerships become more data driven, the ability for them to influence revenue becomes greater. And anybody that can influence revenue in an organization will influence revenue. I think that creates a tendency for it to get absorbed into the sales org more and more over time. Cool. And very similar, this is the same data, but just kind of broken out by partnership teams. So you can just kind of see the story here, as the partnership team grows, then, the likelihood of folks reporting into sales increases as well. So once you get to that 10 plus, it's, more than twice the proportion of teams reporting into sose.
I think you have it backwards. I think it's actually the partnership teams are created from the sales group in most of these cases.
Yeah, you totally be right there. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's like you wouldn't even get to 10 if you weren't reporting into sales, because the increase in headcount is justified by the ROI calculation on revenue attribution. So like sales teams stay small when they're not in the sales org, or if they're sales driven from the beginning, they get carved out, like you said, and it just leads to more headcount.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the partner headcount is actually the account reps and channel reps. That's why. So they usually come from the sales team being basically restructured. That's what my experience is.
Makes perfect sense. And I'll close out here just with this stat that was the biggest, kind of mover and shaker from 2020 to 2021. So we did this survey last year too. So all these questions, we have 2020 data as well, except for the COVID stuff, obviously. And we compared things like, do you do rep-to-rep co-selling, for example? And 62% of companies in 2020 did, 71% in 2021 did. So this by far was the largest year-over-year change in the kind of the propagation of a particular tactic or motion. And this is very, very encouraging in our world, and kind of just, again, reinforces this co-selling is the pathway for most companies to this directly attributable partnership revenue calculation, partner influence revenue.
This is rep to rep outside companies, company to company, not inside company.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Sorry. Across company lines. So this would be, sales rep to sales rep. And this is all facilitated by, partner managers or other folks in the partner org. They're kind of the glue that holds this together, but it is going across company lines, getting sales reps aligned with one another to go to market together, to either co-sell or cross-sell into the same accounts. And this is just really kind of taking, at least amongst our respondent base, taking the world by storm here. And then, speaking of selection bias, right? We obviously send this survey out to a lot of our users and customers, and we know who's a user and who's not. So those using Crossbeam are significantly more likely to be using rep-to-rep co-selling. And that shouldn't be surprising at all, because it's precisely one of the motions that Crossbeam enables. Cool. All right. It kind of hit the nail on the head on timing here, a few minutes over, but I don't know if we had any other questions outstanding, or if you want to go to private session here, Sunir, but
all right.
I'll hand it back
give
to
everyone like 10 seconds to throw a question and we'll answer it. Otherwise, we're going to have the speakers lounge for the exec members to like go into this deeper, because I know there's a lot to bite into. All right, everyone. We actually had a very good Q&A. So let's move over to Hash members, and I'll throw the Zoom meeting link in there. Once again, this is the kind of stuff we talk about all the time. So join us, cloudsoftwareassociation.com. It's free. You should buy drinks occasionally. That's all we ask. And otherwise, we talk about this all day long. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
For more great insights on partnerships and software, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.